Welcome to Activate Yourself with Geeta Sidhu Rob, where we feature otherwise normal people who, because of events in their life, have turned left and done unusual, inspiring, incredible things. Like build a business, become a happiness expert, marry a prince, create an empire, or like your host, set up a health and wellness business, Nosh Detox. Here's your host, Geeta Sidhu Rob.
Hi, my name is Geeta Sidhu Rob, and this is Activate Yourself. And as always, our job here is to, mildly traumatize, terrify, but ultimately inspire you, because the whole show, the reason this show is in existence, because when things go really badly for us, we don't know that there's a reason for the thing to go badly. And usually it's a way of clearing house. And it's a way of getting rid of crap that you would otherwise never, ever, ever get rid of. Ask me how I know, right? Because this happened to me. And today's guest is, again, not an exception. There's these terrible statistics about the number of us in the following years that are going to get cancer. The statistics are horrendous. And so if we know that, and if we know that there is something like that coming to us, and everywhere you go, somebody's getting cancer of some part of the body, because, the trouble is there's so many bloody options. And we spent so much time working with cancer patients here as well. So today's guest is one of those insanely inspiring women. Dr. Bhena Parker, in 1 year, managed to do all of the fighting of the cancer, all of the getting of her body working again, all of the dumping of the husband, all of the choosing herself over everything. I mean, she'll put it more politely than that. All of the choosing herself over everything else. And this is the joy inherent in any illness, problem, issue. You have to learn to choose yourself. And I think we're really bad at choosing ourselves, and particularly as women, because we don't have that muscle. No one has ever taught us to put ourselves first. No one has ever said to us, you matter. Nobody has ever said to us, you have worth and value just for who you are. But when your life is on the line, that's the stage, or your children's lives. For me, it was that when my children's lives were on the line, I was like, you better get out the way, because actually my kids are going to come first. But I did for them what I wouldn't do for me. But then again, as a mother, when you get sick, you will do for you, because you're a mother, that you wouldn't necessarily do for anyone else. And all of that long intro to say, welcome, Bhena. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so very much. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for coming, because we do all get to that. Like even now, yesterday I was at an event, and the lady who ran the event is going in for her surgery for cancer tomorrow morning. One of my clients is the Duchess of York, and she had a mastectomy 2 weeks ago, and it was covered everywhere. And so, she's one of the most high profile women that has talked about it, because she wants there to be some difference. My assistant's husband has cancer. It's just everywhere. And so I think it's very important for us to understand that there is life after cancer, and that there is transformation through cancer. So
Absolutely.
Focus through this all happened for you in 1 year.
Well, when I was diagnosed, first of all, I found the lump when I was 33. And my daughter was just over a year old, and it was like, no, you're too young to have cancer. We'll just keep an eye on it. So we ended up watching this lump for about a year and a half before they officially called it cancer. I was 35 at that point. My kids were 2 and 4, and I was the sole income for our family. And at that point, we had been watching it, and I'd been through so many, exams. I was just like, well, get it out of me. I'm too busy. I'm too busy to be sick. I have too much other stuff to do. Let's get it out of me. Do what has to be done. And I at that point, I was like, I'm giving it a year. I'm going to be through this in a year, and it's going to be taken care of. And, there were bumps along the way. I ended up getting a divorce while I was going through chemo. But at the end of the year, I was able to celebrate. At that point, my divorce had gone through. I had met somebody new, surprisingly, which I wasn't expecting. Yes, my current husband, I'd say that he's my reward for that really horrible year of my life. And luckily, the ex-husband and I still get along great. He's one of my best friends.
Okay, whoa. So you met someone while going through chemo and cancer and mastectomies.
Yes.
Because, hello, it's not just like that. It's the core of femininity we're busy cutting up here, and dumping your husband. And then you met, it's like frigging buses, isn't it? You wait forever and there are none. And then there's 12 at one time. What the hell? So wasn't that an interesting approach to how you saw yourself as a woman? Like on one side, you're getting your boobs cut off, and on another side, you're meeting a man who thinks you're amazing.
It was interesting because, yeah, so the boobs came off in August. This coming Sunday is 13 years cancer-free. So I'm celebrating that for sure. But the boobs came off in August, and the divorce was done in December. And then the next July, I went on a first date, and I was not looking for anything serious. And I went on this first date, and my husband, Mike, sat down in front of me, and it was like a lightning bolt. I was, well, there you are. Like, I wasn't looking for this. I didn't need this, but there he was. 4 months later, we bought a house.
That is so friggin' interesting.
Yeah.
I do think that what happens with this sort of thing is that when we clear the decks, when we dump all this stuff, I do a lot of work around perimenopause. And one of the really things I love about perimenopause is it forces women to really get serious about who the hell they are, what the hell they want, and what on earth they're doing. And you had done all that. You had to choose yourself again and again and again, even if it's because you were a mother. I don't care why, but when you're forced to choose yourself, then everything shows up for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of my treatment was a total hysterectomy as well. So I went into overnight menopause
babe.
at 35. Yeah. So
what the hell?
Menopause, no breasts. I'm out there in the dating world for some sick reason, and this amazing man, he shows up.
Isn't that interesting? So there you had to define being a woman very internally. Talk to me about that.
Oh, it was interesting because there were times, as you know, I had a horrible plastic surgeon to start, and I've had 4 plastic surgeons since then. But there are moments when you're going through these decisions, trying to save your life. And then the people around you are like, oh, well, at least you're going to be skinny and have big boobs. I was like, okay. Every man around me was like,
and you're being an asshole.
Yeah. I mean, my first plastic surgeon used to refer to all of his clients as the ladies. He literally pat me on the head one time and was like, oh, don't you ask too many questions. Just trust that you pick the best doctor. There's not going to be any complications. Your breasts are going to look amazing.
Don't worry your pretty little head about it.
Yeah, I'm not worried about how they're going to look. I want them to not kill me. He was not my plastic surgeon for long. But
so you went through, okay, wait, that's another story. Yeah. It does annoy me that we will accept care from people that completely patronize us, because the way people treat women's bodies is like they own and have ownership over. It's a very white man thing as well.
Very much. She spoke to my husband instead of me when I was in the room.
Yeah, that kind of, I remember, because my son was very ill, somebody going, oh, women always say that. And I was like, has it ever occurred to you to listen to them? Maybe they know their children better than you do.
Right.
And I didn't say bitch at the end because we don't swear, because, that's it. But it did occur to me. Yeah. So that's another thing. How did you, because I know from talking to women doing this, how did you reconcile? Did you have to reconcile your femininity with the loss of everything that kind of makes you feminine?
Absolutely, I did. And it was a thing I reflected on a lot, because it felt like with, I had nursed both my children. Like I said, my kids were young when this happened. So my daughter was nursing when I found the cancer, and I had to wean her to do all the tests. And it felt like with the hysterectomy and the breasts being gone, that all the things that truly made me a woman were gone. And yet all of the conversation was about, well, how do we make you look like the perfect fake woman? How do we get you the perfect breasts now? And with the hysterectomy, it was definitely something I kind of struggled with. And
no, stop a minute. That's just so friggin' interesting, because that's Barbie. Because as long as you look good from the outside, who gives a shit what it's like on the inside?
100%. Yes. And the funniest thing was I had breast implants. Implants were done, several months later after chemo, after I'd healed a bit. And you don't get nipples for a while.
No,
so you have these
somewhere up here, don't they?
Well, mine had been removed completely. So they had to recreate nipples. But it was funny because when I first started dating my husband, I had my nipple reconstruction surgery planned for about 6 weeks after we met. And so I told him, I was like, if you want to see the Barbie boobies, because I called them that because there were no nipples. I was like, if you want to see the Barbie boobies, you got to work really hard because they're going to get nipples soon.
Oh my Lord, baby.
Yeah, there really were Barbie moments of it all.
I'm slightly traumatized. That's just friggin' insane.
It was a rough year.
Yeah, no shit. Because we're definitely talking about your work, but we just have to stop here a moment because I've just been in the US and there was all this conversation and everybody was wearing little Barbie badges and I put on an anti-Barbie badge because, and one of the women came up to me almost in tears and went, "Why are you anti-Barbie?" I'm like, no, absolutely pro-Barbie. Absolutely. Don't you just think that if this is the seminal work that we're expressing ourselves in, we're screwed? Has that kind of occurred to anyone? And we need to do a friggin' a podcast on Barbie. And she didn't understand it. But it's exactly what you're saying. If that's our seminal work, we're really stuffed.
Yeah.
We're so screwed. Right? Because that was what happened to you. Physically, it was all about as long as you looked okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like, get the fake boobs, let the hair grow back, everything's perfect, you're fine. Without realizing it, I was in treatment for 10 years. I had 10 years of medication. I've had my eighth surgery was 3 months ago, and I'm 13 years out and healthy, and I'm still having surgeries.
Why?
But people think, oh, because you look good, your hair's back, you're not bald anymore, cancer's done. Well, I mean, yes, I'm healthy. I'm lucky for that. And
why are you still having surgeries?
Oh, because my body did not like breast implants. I had 3 different sets of implants and my body healed around them with it's called capsular contracture, where you get a lot of scar tissue. And so I would have pinched nerves, limited range of motion. We tried 3 different times. And so finally I had a different type of reconstruction a few months ago where they used my own body tissue to create new breasts.
Oh, babe.
It was a lot.
Really, yeah, but it's been it's almost like a symbolic journey, isn't it? Where it's your own body healing yourself, and it's the refusal to accept anything from outside.
Yes. And this part, it was the hardest surgery I've had. It was it was the hardest recovery. Like I tend to be good with pain and recover well. This one was hard, and I'm so glad I did it. It was a great surgery to do.
Was it hard because it was emotionally hard or physically or both?
No, it was physically hard because they used part of my abdomen. It was like having a C-section and a mastectomy at the same time.
Yes, that's what they did here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, I really salute you. That's so hard. That's so hard. And I salute you for, the things that I want to salute you for are the things that we don't ever salute women for standing up for what you needed, for having every conversation that you needed on the way, for being a person that said, I don't want this. It has to go differently. I don't want this. I don't want you. And as women, we are not trained to say that ever. We're not trained to reject people in authority, and doctors are people in authority.
Yes, that was interesting because especially at that stage, he had started my reconstruction with the mastectomy. He had put the original their tissue expanders in, and then finding another plastic surgeon who was willing to pick up what somebody else had started was very hard to do because they're very particular about their work.
Yeah.
And so they want to be the only artist in the body, right? So it was a struggle during treatment to go find another surgeon too.
I really honor the fact that you were brave enough to do that because those are skill sets you were not born with and you developed them on the way, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess that is a really great segue into the work that you do for a living, because you take, we're going to go for a little break and then we're going to have this conversation because you're a psychologist by training, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And what you're doing is taking I didn't really understand for a very long time that the science of psychology is actually what it is, because that's not something I understood. Why would I know? But I don't know how many people do know that. And you're taking that very scientific approach into organizations to help people learn about leadership by learning more about themselves, which I cannot wait to hear about. So we're going to go for a quick break and come back.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
So we're back to talk about the science of this. Talk to me about what you actually do. Tell us about you being a psychologist and how you now apply that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a social psychologist, which I always like to tell people, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a therapist, I'm not providing counseling of any kind. Social psychology is essentially the study of how an individual impacts a group. So leadership, influence, communication, persuasion, all those types of things, but also how the group impacts the individual. So what do all of the groups you belong to, your gender, your ethnicity, your nationality, all of the social identities that we have, how do those impact who you are, what you believe about the world, how you show up, what you believe about your role in the world? All of those things impact the individual as well. So my dissertation was actually looking at how do people manage these different social identities and roles that we have, and the impact that has on achievement, performance, resilience. So if you're threatened in one area of your life, do you have another social identity that can build you up, right? So in the work that I do with executives, high-performing leaders, it's about bringing that science, that understanding of human behavior in to not just say, oh, well, good leaders look like this and good organizations look like that, and this is how you show up.
So it's
but
so
really,
generic.
okay, you as a leader, what is it you believe about how you show up and how you communicate, and how do you manage, how do you even get clear about who you are and who you want to be? So many leaders, you're going through life on autopilot because you've checked all the boxes. You went to school, you got the degree, you got the job, you got the fancy promotion, you started the family, like your life looks great on paper. But then you wake up and you go, well, I've been doing all this stuff. Everybody else is happy with who I am. I'm supporting family and I look successful on paper, but I'm unmotivated. I'm uninspired. I'm just going through these motions, right? And that's where the psychology piece comes in to go, well, you did all these things because you believed you were supposed to. You were conditioned to believe that this was expected of you. But here's how we take a step back and go, what is your vision for your own life? It might be what you're already doing and you just need to find a new way to approach it. Might be something totally different. And then we build up these beliefs about your value, your self-worth, because you've gotten those things from checking the boxes. We're able to say, well, how do you get that value and self-worth from following your own passions and your own path? How do you disengage yourself from what others are telling you have to do the things that really matter most to you? Because we have such a limited time here. So living our lives for the benefit of others only. I mean, I believe in the greater good. I want to benefit others, but to only do that, to put ourselves at the bottom of that list all the time, ultimately, that's not serving anybody. That's setting an example that you don't want other people to follow.
So Baina, what's very funny about listening to you say this is exactly the conversation we had in the first half, which is the first third of this conversation, where we talked about you finding your pathway and refusing to accept what everyone was telling you to do. It literally sounds like the same things.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of overlap in my life. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to learn these lessons and do something with them.
Yeah, 100%. So when you're looking at someone as a leader, talk to me about like what kind of clients come at you? When someone's coming at you, how are they presenting? Because then of course I want to ask you what like the shift is.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of clients, some of my favorite clients I've worked with, I always ask them, what are the biggest challenges you're facing? And they'll say things like, I've spent my life climbing this ladder and I don't even know if it's my ladder, or if it's leaned up against the right wall.
Yeah. Is it enough even?
Yeah, exactly. Like I've been pushing this boulder up the hill for so long. I don't know who gave me this boulder, but I just know it's my job to push the boulder. And they're just exhausted, but they're used to achieving. They're high achievers. They are high performers. They know how to check the boxes and get what looks right. They have the accolades, but they get to this moment in their lives. They go, but who am I doing this for? There's this moment of just like, but this is my life. And that feels very selfish to say most of the time. It's hard for them to admit that they want something different. And yet they know that if they have all this capacity, all this capability, why aren't they following their own dreams? Sometimes they don't even know what those dreams are. They just know they're not living it right now. So the program I use is actually called the Life Aligned Leader. And it's about getting leaders aligned with what matters most to them. Your job may be great, but if your job is taking all of your time and you're not spending that time with your family, or you're not taking care of your health, I mean, those things are going to catch up to you sooner or later, right? But it's how do you be much more intentional with your choices? How do you go from reacting to every fire that's put in front of you to responding and going, that's not really a fire, that's a candle. Or that might be a fire, but that's not my fire, that's somebody else's fire to put out. Instead of just jumping into that being, I'm the problem solver, I'm the leader, I'm the one who can fix this, and going, I don't have to stay in this space that leaves me burned out and stressed and overwhelmed and frustrated. I can take a step back and go, that's somebody else's fire, that's somebody else's challenge. I can train people to do that. I know I can learn how to delegate and go take care of the things that matter most to me. And that varies from leader to leader.
And what I like about this is that this is one of the things that came up so much over COVID, that the feminine leadership styles that happened at that point to come from women, because feminine leadership can come from women and men,
yes.
Was something that was so much more effective. Because like Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand is a lifestyle prime minister. The way she functions is she had a baby, she would go on holiday, she would take her husband with her. She took her baby to the UN to have whatever, a NATO meeting. And I looked at that and I was like, you're living your life and your leader. And so the thing is that we've always thought that leadership, the thing that upsets me the most is that when it's a service-based offering, that just feels to me like an excuse for you to say, so you just need to keep giving and I don't matter at all. It's like, screw that, because it's like a lot of people in spiritual pursuits and in healing and in coaching. It's like, oh, I don't really like charging for what I do. And I'm like, well, bully for you. I not only like charging, but I like being very expensive about what I do.
Exactly.
Because then I know you're paying more attention to what is happening as opposed to being free because, or trading or whatever that. It's very interesting that. And the thing that I also found very interesting is that you said that a lot of these leaders don't know what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Corporate life does not need you to know what you want. It just needs you to execute.
Mm-hmm.
How do you
just keep holding another carrot? Oh, you'll get that next promotion, you'll get that next office, you'll get that next team. So many leaders don't stop to ask, well, that's great, but is that actually what I want?
How do you help them to understand what they do want in the Life Aligned Leader program?
So the first step in Life Aligned Leader is I call it the clarity system, the alignment system. And it's about getting that clarity. It's about, we do a lot of work around core values to start. A lot of people think, oh, I know what's important to me. I know what my values are. And I say, okay, list them. And they're like, and they can't. I'm like, give me 5 adjectives. What are the things that or 5 nouns or whatever they are? Tell me what matters most to you. And they're like, family, and some maybe like, some of them are clear, but getting really detailed in on what those core values are. I have an exercise I go through. It's available for free on my website. That once you identify these core values, and they can change over time. You revisit every year, you get a promotion, you get a new family member, revisit your values. They're going to change over time. But once you know what your values are, then when you have opportunities in front of you, you can say, well, if one of my values was, lived experiences, I really love travel, but with this promotion, I might get to travel, but I'm always in a hotel conference room, or I get to take these trips, but they're never with my family. Well, then you're out of alignment with that value and you need to make a change. Or when people say, well, I'm really frustrated and I don't know why, or I'm really burned out, I go, well, what are your values? Which of these are you not meeting? Okay, yes, you're spending time with your family, you're getting your significance from your title or your paycheck, but this need for self-care, you're not spending any time on your spiritual wellness. There's a gap there. If you address this core value, address that need, all of a sudden your life can come back into that sort of equilibrium, that balance, because your core values, you're addressing them. So we start with core values because it can guide decision-making. Is this really the thing you want? Does it meet these core values? Or it can address that feeling of just general malaise of something's wrong, but I don't know what. Well, this can help us identify it too.
The thing, I love that, because I think that one of the things I remember when I got divorced and we ended up going from extremely wealthy to extremely poor and homeless with 3 kids. And I remember the fact that I had it's another story. Yeah. I remember the fact that I had a very strong sense of self. I didn't define it as values. I wouldn't define it as that. But the fact that I had a very strong sense of self really stood me in extremely good stead. I knew exactly what I would and I wouldn't do for money.
Perfect.
And that really helped me. And I hadn't really thought of it as having a value system, but I did. So we're going to go for a break. When we come back, I want you to talk about the fact that, you were saying that before you got, because of your health and illness problems, you were talking about the fact that you didn't want to go and work for yourself because you were afraid of risk. And then you did it. And I'm really interested in that, because I'm literally someone who's worked for myself for my whole adult life. I think my father told me I was unemployable at about 21.
Yeah.
Which is his fault, because he didn't work for anyone. I want to talk about that, because I think that's such an interesting thing in this day and age where people are shifting so much what they do, right? So we're just going to go for a quick break.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
So we're back. I want to know about that risk of going to work for yourself. What made you, how did you approach that risk? Because you will have a nice sciencey approach to it. And what made you make those choices? Or do you give a sciencey explanation for it?
Yeah. So it's interesting because you mentioned your parents, and my parents. My dad's a firefighter, so he did not have a steady 8 to 5 job. I mean, he had a steady job, but he would work 3 or 4 jobs because he was only at the fire station. You know, he'd be there 24 hours a day, but he'd work a day and then off a day, then work a day and off 2 days. So when those days off, he was also a fire marshal for, you know, the small town we were in, and he was an arson investigator. So he always had all these jobs. So even though he was a firefighter, he had this entrepreneurial space. And my mom, always an entrepreneur. She, you know, opened businesses and worked sometimes, didn't work other times. So growing up, I grew up in a household where the 8 to 5 job, it was out there. Sometimes my mom had an 8 to 5, but not always. And going through graduate school and getting a PhD, and, you know, they're training you to go be either an academic researcher or get a job. And so that's what I did. I came out of grad school and I had a job. I had several jobs and they were fine. But over time, I was like, again, I was checking all the boxes. My titles, I was national director of this. I was statewide director of that. I was working in education policy, and I was having an impact. I felt like I, you know, like I said, that I believe in impacting the greater good. So I felt like I was doing jobs that mattered, and I was miserable at the same time. I had this moment, my last official job before I became an entrepreneur, I was working in child abuse prevention, and it was work that mattered. I was helping create and disseminate programs that went out to schools, teaching kids about how to avoid child abuse, how do you find your safe adult, all this stuff that was really important. And I would wake up and I would hate going to work. And I finally had this moment that I thought, well, if I'm this miserable doing work that matters this much, I have to make a change. And yet at this point, as a cancer survivor, I had this belief that because of my medical history, I was always going to have to be an employee, that no one was going to
healthcare system in the
exactly
because it's so
the US healthcare system. Oh my goodness. And then finally I got to the point of, I was like, well, you know what, I've said that for years. That's a crutch. That's an excuse. That is a limiting belief. How can I challenge that? And I went out to the, Obamacare, the healthcare marketplace, and I found insurance that was actually better than what my employer offered. And I was like, wait a second. And I had this moment, the Girl Scout Council here in Arizona, where I live, they hosted an event for women leaders. They called it a spa day for the soul, but it was a 3-day weekend retreat. And it was a handful of women just coming together. They were leaders in our community. And it was just about giving back and taking care of ourselves and this kind of thing. And I was having this conversation with this woman, and I was talking about, well, I really want to go out and be an entrepreneur, but, I have a steady paycheck now, And I was like, it feels too risky to my husband and my kids to leave this stability. And she just looks at me, she goes, so you're protecting them? I was like, exactly. I'm sacrificing what I want to protect my family. She goes, are you protecting them from all of the money you're going to make when you're self-employed and all the lives you're going to, she's like, what is it? And I was like, oh, I've totally made up this belief because it was scary that I was doing the right thing. And she was like, you're protecting them from all of your greatness. Stop doing that. And literally the next day I was like, I'm going to give my notice. I don't know what's coming next, but for my 42nd birthday, My birthday's at the beginning of May. My kids got out of school middle of May. I said, I'm going to give notice on my birthday. I'll give 2 weeks. My last day of work will be my kids' last day of school. I get to spend the summer with them and figure out what's next. I gave my notice. Literally 36 hours later, a friend called and said, hey, I've been wanting you to contract with me for a while. I've got a 3-month gig. I'm going to pay you. And I had sat down with my husband and figured out the exact amount I needed to cover the bills. That was the amount she was offering.
I friggin' love that.
And I was like, oh, I got this barrier out of the way. The universe brought me what I needed. And I have never looked back. I have never regretted that decision a single day. And it's been over 7 years now.
Yeah, I do. I'm so with you on this. I don't know what it's like to be told to do something. And I only do the stuff. But even within that, as an entrepreneur, there's the boring crap. And then there's the put you on fire crap, right? That just, I'm like I was having the conversation before you, I was like, oh my God, I was born to do this. And it was just this excitement, but it's, but like my best friend is massively important in corporate, and he sits there and he does all this stuff and he friggin' loves it. And I'm just looking at him and I'm like, okay, I would just shoot myself in the head. And he looks at me and goes, I would shoot myself in the head. And I love that there's different strokes for different folks, and I'm a big fan of that. But I think the thing that is the hardest to manage is when you don't want to do what you're doing.
Yeah.
I've always been privileged enough that I almost like what I do, other than outright love it to death. Because there are times when you do what you're doing and you're like, okay, I'm so done. I ran this business for 15 years. Somebody just please shoot me and take it away. I don't want to do it anymore.
It's time for something different. Yes.
Right. But I loved it in that process.
Yeah.
And I think when you do what you have to do for work, like my best friend will say, I do this because I'm doing it for my family. And I'm like, yeah. And you just hate it, right? He goes, no. And I was like, well, stop being a bloody martyr, because you clearly love it. And it so happens it's great for your family, right? So that's I think we don't understand that there are days where we always don't like everything we're doing, but then they're made up for the days where we absolutely are on fire with what we're doing. Yes. And if you don't have the on fire days, then you shouldn't be doing kind of what you're doing.
And the thing that's interesting is that I think for a lot of women, it's a little scary to admit that you love what you're doing. Like, we celebrate this misery of like, oh, everyone's got to go to work and it's such a grind. Like, what if you love what you're doing? What is this belief that we're not allowed to love our lives?
No, I call this connecting in victimhood. When you sit next to a woman, she'll be like, yeah, like the woman behind me on the airplane, because I flew back last night, and she said, and you don't have my kosher meal, and I'm a cancer survivor. I was like, I'm sorry, what? I was like, nope, I'm just going to sit right here and shut up. And it's not my job. But there's that thing of connecting in victimhood. Why don't we connect in our passion instead?
Exactly. And that's just it. Like the more we get to embrace the things we love, the more we get to show up, the more we get to recognize who our whole self is and get to show up as our whole selves. Like, it just changes. You show up differently in the world, which has that ripple effect. And that's, I love to live my life this way and to help my clients get to that way. Because, as a coach, people are like, oh, well, go create a course, go do this. And so you reach more people. I'm like, no. With the high touch, high value work I do, I'm reaching more people because this leader is going to show up differently, which means that the people that they interact with show up differently, which that has a ripple effect. If you can work with a handful of leaders in a company, you can change the whole culture. And that means the person who's, at the most entry level job, they have an entirely different work experience because the leaders know who they are and love who they are and accept that and are willing to embrace themselves as whole people and their team as whole people, which means that everybody gets to show up as a whole person, not just, one or two people.
And when your leader isn't a complete asshole, it just makes it a better working place.
It really does.
It makes it a better working place, and then it makes it a better place to be. I really have enjoyed this conversation. I'm so happy and grateful that the first part was not at all what we planned, because it was about your vasectomy, good grief, but your hysterectomy even, yes. And the mastectomy. There was a lot of ectomies in that.
I've had a lot of surgeries.
because I don't know that we have those conversations enough. And I thank you for that, because I think a lot of women will want to have heard that, and then we can have had that conversation. So I really appreciate you being here for that.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
How do people reach you?
My website is level42consulting.com, because it was my 42nd birthday present to myself. So level 42, and on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This is the wonderful Dr. Dana Parker. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Geeta.
And this is Activate Yourself. I hope that was inspiring and it made you laugh. I think there were bits that would have made you laugh, totally made me laugh. And that they made you think about things differently, because, you know, you're just not stuck. You just need to change your experience of where you are in order for you to feel unstuck. You don't have to change the thing that you think you have to change. The way you show up will change how you live every single thing that you do. I'm so grateful for the time that you've spent with me and my guest, and thank you very much for joining us. My name is Geeta Sidhu Rob, and this is Activate Yourself.
Thank you so much for joining us. Our goal was to give you pause, make you think about your life, and inspire you to say, wow, what if I tried to do that? If they can do it, so can I. Did it work? Let us know by finding us on social media at Geeta Sidhu Rob or at Nosh Detox. We upload new shows every 2 weeks here, and if you start to miss us, check us out on YouTube.